Hello and welcome back to another Faith Message. I'm Carl and I'm part of the team here at the Richards Bay Baptist Church. Today's message, we start a series on heroes of faith, men and women in Scripture who have done amazing things and have been recognized for their faith. And as we go through the series, I want to encourage you and say to you, when we go through it, look at how ordinary these people were and how extraordinary their faith is because of the small things that they did that made the biggest difference. And so today we start off with a character called Jacob. Now Jacob is really the deceiver, the one who grabbed onto his brother's foot at birth, the one who always made a plan. And sometimes we look at the life of Jacob and we'd wonder, how can this guy be this guy recognized for his faith? But then when we look at Hebrews 11, and Hebrews 11 is this book, this chapter in the Bible where we see, it's almost like a hall of faith, where we see all these guys recognized for their faith, and it talks about what they've done and why they're recognized for their faith. And then, in amongst all of these, we get guys who shut the mouths of lions, who've done great things. And in the middle of this, we find Jacob for something different. It says in verse 21, by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the tip of his staff. Interesting. Jacob is recognized for on his lying on his deathbed, blessing his grandsons, and then after that, standing up and worshiping God, leaning on the top of his staff. And it's a really interesting story. It's interesting to see that wow, of all the things Jacob's done, this is what he's recognized for. And the question is why? I mean, you can look throughout Scripture. It talks about God, the father of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And Jacob's all in that. He's recognized kind of almost in the same breath as Abraham and the fathers of the faith. And why? Recognized for leaning on the top of his staff on his deathbed, worshiping God. So it comes back to chapter 32 in Genesis, where Jacob finds himself alone, separated from his family, and wrestling with this man. And it doesn't actually say specifically in the scripture that this man is a certain person, who doesn't name who he is. But we find that Jacob wrestles with him all night long. And at daybreak, this man's like, let's stop. And Jacob refuses. He refuses to give up. And so we read that this man, I'll read to you in from verse 24. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overthrow him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Persistent, unless you bless me. The man asked him, what is your name? So Jacob answered him. Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome. And then just a few verses later on, says that Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. So Jacob's wrestled with God, and he's overcome. And it's an interesting verse because again it talks about man wrestling with God, and still at the end of the day God basically breaks his hip, and so for the rest of his life Jacob is forced to walk with a staff that he has to lean on because he physically can't support his whole body because of this hip that's broken. And again, we see the same thing. And it's interesting to note that all throughout Scripture, later on, it doesn't refer to Israel. It refers to Jacob. And so his name is changed. He's the one who wrestled with God and man and overcome. But yet still, when it's referred to, it's called Jacob. Because Jacob was fierce in his fighting, in his spirit, to continue to go on without giving up. And again, trusting in the blessing of God. He trusted that God will bless him. And imagine on your deathbed, lying there, and he blesses the sons, and basically his grandsons. And basically this blessing is all about the inheritance. It's all about what they'll inherit. And Jacob knew that God is faithful and that God would bless them. And because of his faith in God, not because of his own wealth, he had faith that God would give what he blessed his grandsons with. And so he gets up, and imagine this, your last moments, you frail, this is literally just before he dies. He gets up, physically having to lean on a staff, and worships God. Jacob worshipped no matter what the pain, no matter what the cost, knowing that God is faithful, and he believed that all the way to the end. And so no matter the great things that Jacob did in his life, not the fact that he wrestled God, no, he's recognized because at the end of the day, he worshipped even when it hurt. He worshipped even when it hurt because he had faith that God would do what he promised. And so today I want to encourage you, no matter where you come from, what you're going through, look at the promises God's given you and have faith in that. And no matter how much it hurts, worship. Worship God because he is always faithful.